So far, I hope you know exactly what's going on. If you don't, can I ask you a great favour and go listen to the other vampire episodes? I think there's 5 of them or something. And if you like this, can you like it and give me a comment and maybe share it somewhere? You know, if you've got friends. I wish I had friends. Yeah. Anyway, let's get on with it. So, do you know what? Go listen to the other vampire episodes. Otherwise, I'm going to take like half this episode to tell you where we're at and stuff. And I did that a couple of episodes ago, and people got a bit arsey about it. So I'm just going to carry on. Well, I'm all prepared to go to a goth night tonight. I hope once you can go goth, you can come back. Oh, God. I've managed to get myself some like gothic clothing, which was much to the amusement of my posit fan. He's my werewolf soul. Again, please go listen to other episodes, or this is going to be a little bit samey. I'm going to this goth night at Jilly's on Oxford Street. That night is cunningly called Underworld. Can you see what they did there? They took a well-known vampire franchise and used its name. That's clever, that is. It was even listed on the internet as vampire friendly. Fecking vampire friendly. What idiots. Apparently, the humans go along and boost the egos of the fangified ones by worshipping them. It seems a little bizarre to me. I've not found any like werewolf friendly nightclubs. Well, I suppose there's furry nights. Oof. Furries terrify me, so I don't think I'd never go to them. That's a dark world in which I would never step. At the club night, the humans offer themselves as a buffet for the partaking of the dark ones. They give themselves to be fed on. Crazy shit in my mind. I think they probably hope that they're going to be turned into vampires or something, you know. Probably not going to happen, though. Vampires are, let's say, choosy, often choosing not to create any level of competition. I'm going there really with one intention, that's to kill a vampire bitch lady who has the murdering hots for me after I killed her brother and lover. The brother and lover were the same person, which is a bit of a shock. Keep the bloodline pure and all that. Can vampires breed? So many questions. Well, I didn't realise that she was a brother lover, and they did say they were going to kill me, and that seemed a good reason to rip his head off. She disagrees, and has tried now to kill me on a number of occasions, so do you know what? It's my turn to do the hunting, even if I have to dress like a goth to do it. It really hurts my sense of style, but I've swallowed my pride, and I'll do it. I do have a lot of conflict in my heart, though, as the vampire woman is, like, super beautiful, good looking, and hot. I mean, like, volcanic hot. No, like lava hot, like really hot. No, like the centre of the sun hot. I love gothic girls. They're, like, so sexy. There are a lot of things I would rather do with the Queen of the Damned than kill her, but that obviously require her consent. We have a plan. That is Fen, Malcolm, and I. We are going to go to the club and see what happens. That's the plan I suggested because it's easy and often the most fun. I get all my best stories and exciting adventures when I walk into something wholly unprepared and unaware of the risks. Being amortal and not immortal and super confident can get you into shitty spots and then out of them often. Apparently that wasn't good enough for my posit, though, was a plan. Yeah, he sat here shaking his head. He was a little worried that these creatures could actually kill me if they wished. He didn't want me to take any risks, so he decided what he would do is reconnoitre the club. Reconnoitre is a great word, isn't it? It's a posh word for have a look around. We learnt lingo like that briefly when we were in the army briefly. I'm pretty fortunate. The posit, my wolf soul thing, can go ahead and he's sat there now. He can go and leave me and go invisibly through the world and check out what is going on. It doesn't really matter how far he gets away. We continue to communicate through mental mind bollocks and all that, and we can see through each other's eyes, which sort of means that he can go in and scope out places, and I can see, and no one knows. It was super useful when we did spy missions. I did a lot of work, in the army that saved thousands, maybe even millions of lives. How about that? Good guy. Wait a moment, are we sure that vampires as supernatural beings can't see you, Fen? Shit, so many questions and so little time. I suppose we'll find out in a strangely exciting manner when I continue with this story. That would be hilarious. Can you imagine if they could see him? If that was the case, then it'll change everything from plan A to plan Z. He decided to follow the Vamps into the club when they arrived so that we could see where she is and then allow me to know what the fuck to do. Fen and I are a little at odds here, you see. I hope that they are laying a trap for me, although we both agree that they know that we are coming tonight. He doesn't think it is a trap. He believes they don't care enough to lay a trap because they have huge egos. They had some of their folk follow me when I went goth shopping, and they kind of outwitted me a bit there. I killed the two normal human people that followed me, but realised I'd been watched from a distance. I could sort of tell that it was cleverly done, and I only just noticed the flash of a lens in the sun, or would I have ever known? No, I'd been watched killing. So we can assume they know I'm coming to the vampire-friendly night, but I wasn't going to be vampire-friendly, that was to be sure. I got ready and wore my lovely full-length Burberry raincoat over the godforsaken kit I was wearing. I would describe what I wore, but for my own dignity, I'm not. How can women who dress as goths look so amazing? Goth men? Well, sorry, goth men, you look silly. Even Keanu looked a bit daft in The Matrix, and he's only one grade less cool than Depp. Fen was even trying to get me to put flipping makeup on, but I'd rather not fight vampires than wear eyeliner, even if you call it guy-liner. No, it is not a dismissive thing. If you want to wear it, that's fine, and I'm sure you look fantastic. But me wearing it, nope, hard pass and all that. Now, if you wonder why I'm talking about Jillies now, and you know about these things, you may have guessed that this all happened a few years ago. Jillies has been closed for about 10 years, and tonight will be why. This is all from my fond memories of my past killing and murdering. It was long ago, and you will see why I brought it up in the next episode. Yes, there's another vampire episode. I still have a souvenir from the night downstairs in my art room, a wonderful keepsake that I love deeply. They closed Jilly's due to asbestos being found in the building. That is the official line they give. They covered up that night and that shit really well. So we set off. I went with Malcolm and Fenrir in the car on that fateful night. Malcolm and I would drop off Fenrir on the pavement. I love releasing him into the wild. It's majestic to see the giant beast loping along the packed streets. He would be outside the club and would wait there until he saw the vamps enter. We thought this might be the best idea. This way, we might get an idea of the odds against us. I didn't really give a fuck about the odds. I wanted a fight, and I only really wanted one of the vamps, and that was the Little Lady of Darkness. Any others that were there would be part of the day's catch. We got there when the night was already down and dark, obviously, because if it weren't dark, the vamps would burn up in the sunlight, wouldn't they? Maybe that was the truth. Sunlight might kill them. Who the fuck knows what the truth is? I mean, I know all the bullshit about werewolves that I hear, so who knows the truth about vampires? I mean, I'm supposed to die from silver and stuff. I'm supposed to transform in agony. That doesn't happen. I'm also supposed to be like this guilt-riddled beastie who hates the fact that he kills and murders out of control when the fat-faced moon arises. I'm not like that. I'm in complete control at all times, and I just love murdering and shit, I really do. So who knows what the truth is about vampires? Maybe they can walk around in the sun, but just don't like tans, or possibly have, sort of genetic enhancement for skin cancer or get heat hives. Who knows? I hope that I'll find out what hurts them tonight. I know removing their head kills them, but that's the case with most things, really. Anyway, back to the night tonight. I hung back in the car while the posit sat on the street looking for vampires to arrive. It was amusing to see him sitting there, a giant wolf in the middle of the path. People wandered around him and past him. It was strange that they avoided him because he's invisible to humans. We know you can walk right through him as though he's not there. Having said that, the spot he sat on was like a bubble of space that no one would enter. The humans purposefully did not walk through him. It was as though they were aware that something was there, something that told their monkey brain to avoid it. It was hilarious to see the people on the street part around him and then regroup after the passing. The queue outside the club was not full of the cool, hot goth people you thought it would be. This really was no film set. This was not going to be the club scene at the start of Blade. The extras were mainly extra normal, extra skinny, extra fat, or just extra something. The clothes were cheap and not the best fitting that they could be, and the hair dye was poorly done, and the makeup was badly applied. These weren't the Instagram girls of goth that I could swoon over. They were, well, they were the real things, the outsider nerds that had found a team they could support and that they would hope support with them. A stupid, big, large, stupid limousine pulled up outside the club. It was stupid. It had to be them. It just had to be. The private plate kind of gave it away. It was Vamp 1. I suppose it could be some like big goth band or something, but I assumed it would be the Fan Gang. I mean, this was the type of cheesy nonsense that I would expect from them. They thought this was cool. Their glamour obviously did not extend to the cars they drove. I must admit, I kind of lost a little bit of respect for them as he got out of that vehicle. There were 5 of the dark ones. The first 2 that got out were male-ish and were some type of bodyguard. They had that shifty look to them that I'd learnt from the army to recognise. Their long latex jackets obviously would hide a number of weapons that really, as vampires, they didn't need. The excellent news for me was that if they had those jackets on, they'd just get in the way and be almost impossible to remove quickly when the wolf hit the vamp. One of them was full of facial piercings and probably had them everywhere else. Not a great idea for close combat. They also wore high-heeled boots. High-heeled boots for a fight? God, they weren't experts in any way. I mean, they may be vampires, but they were not trained to know what they were doing. However, they took up good positions to oversee the area that they watched. I must admit, they exuded like a grace, a kind of raw charisma and a confidence that they could handle anything. And I'm sure they could handle anything except an angry werewolf, to be honest. The queue at the door went quiet as the vamps walked towards the doorman. He was one of them old-fashioned doormen, you remember those? He was massive, ugly, bald, and wore shades. Another 2 Anne Ricers got out of the limousine, and then she came. Fuck, she was hot. Her legs were first, and what a pair of legs. I mean, a foot planted itself on the pavement, and then another. A hand extended from the back door and was taken by another vamp who helped her from the car. She didn't really need that help, but it made her look so elegant and sophisticated. Her nails were red. The jewellery that she wore was golden but encrusted with rubies that made it look like droplets of fresh blood ran over her. She had red patent thigh-length boots. The boots had 6-inch stiletto heels, and these were genuinely stiletto heels. Blades came to a sharpened point. And she managed to walk in them like a dancer. She was wrapped in red latex, and even I fell in love with her. Her glamour power smacked me in the face like a sledgehammer. Her black hair hung down her back, past her ass, and down the backs of her thighs in a tidy ponytail. Her short latex jacket was red, and she wore the same lipstick colour as her outfit. She wore red wraparound sunglasses, and somehow her detailed black tattoos had now turned red. She was on a theme tonight, and that theme was rubber, red, and raw sexuality. For any red-blooded person, this was red-hot to see. Malcolm sat next to me and was moaning slightly. He had a really red face, and I knew he was crippled with desire. He would not be standing up or rushing anywhere for a while, let's put it like that. The queue at the door went silent as she walked. No, walk isn't the right word. Insinuated away? There's not a word for the way she walked. She got to the doorman, who bowed, and opened the door before her. It was magic to watch, and obviously some kind of magic was going on. She was a dark goddess, and all wanted her, and they all wanted her to want them. She ain't that hot! Jarringly formed from my posit and broke the spell over me in my brain. Huh? Remember, the mission is to kill it, not to fuck it, said Fen. I was not sure at this point what mission I wanted. The conflict raged in my head. Fen followed the crew as they entered the club. He was directly behind the woman, and I'm going to go into it again. I watched her walk through his eyes. Oh, what a walk. An amazing walk. The sway of the hips was hypnotizing. Left, right, left, right. Sorry, I need to shut up about that walk, sorry. They went off to a booth behind a red VIP rope and sat down. Adoring people surrounded it, and two randoms at the rope were chosen at random and randomly brought in to sit with the vamps. Randomly. Then Fen turned away with a laugh. This is going to be easy. Well, you're up. I looked at Malcolm, who was still catatonic. It took me a while to get his attention back. Eventually, I brought in two with a swift smash of my backhand. Malcolm! Right, Malcolm, after this, please go to see the girls at Auntie Jane's house and sort yourself out and put it on my tab, okay? Malcolm, still not wholly in this world, looked at me and smiled. Yes, boss. I patted myself down and smoothed down my jacket and sat there for a moment, building myself up, and I smiled at him, and I just knew this was going to be incredibly good fun. A big fuck-off fight with the fangified freaky fuckers. I dropped the sun visor and just checked my face and hair. I'm good looking. I smiled and smiled. I'm going to kill and destroy. Oh boy, oh yeah. So here goes. I stepped from the car and took off the raincoat and swallowed the sick down that I got from disgust of my own outfit. I could see it in the car window. I took a pair of black wraparound shades and walked towards the bouncer, exuding as much confidence as possible, even though I felt like a complete twat in the clothing I was wearing. I walked at the massively muscled man as though he should get out of my way because I was important. Strangely, he didn't stop me. He just smiled at me and just opened the door. Now I knew this was a trap. The thrill! They were ready for me. The bouncer had recognised me and let me in. I was so excited. Now, as you know, my motto is to retaliate first, so I did what I hoped was the unexpected. As soon as I walked into the club, I invited Fen in and we transformed into my black-furred werewolf form within the safety of the smoke machine's billow at the door. I was now ready to begin the killing. I thought the vampires would expect me to come in and single out the vampire crew. That was not my intention. I was going to go into the densely packed club and get to them, but I would go through everything else that was in the way. This chaos and carnage would be so against what they do. They like things neat and tidy with no one knowing that they'd been involved. I was going to, well, in the words of the great strategist Miyamoto Musashi, I was gonna fuck shit up. It felt great to be my giant self again. My claws were ready. My teeth was ready. My mind was ready. I opened my heightened senses to the world before me. Fen and I were in perfect harmony and happiness. I was going to rip and tear these motherfuckers to pieces. Collateral damage would be the thing that would turn the tide of the war here. Chaos, with no seeming reason or rhyme, was going to be my methodology. The Goths reacted in the ways your animal brain lets you when you see a predator. You still have a memory in your DNA of when you were at a lower rung of the food chain. They either froze or they ran. I ripped, tore and wrenched. I bit through throats and arms and bodies. My claws slashed and rendered. I grabbed what was in reach in the dense crowd and broke and battered. The floor was covered in rivulets of beautiful red, like the red that the bitch wore. My motion was not sort of intending to kill, but to cause as much injury as possible, because I wanted to cause mass destruction until I got to the fangy footbags. I was now coated in blood and gore, sticky, ferocious, and happy in the moment. I'd gone totally overkill, and whatever the trap, the calm and restrained vampires were not ready for me in this. I knew they wanted an honourable fight. Fuck that, this is war. Over my reaping of the Goths sang the unique, dirgy voice of Jim Morrison. It was beautiful. This is the end, my only friend, the end. And it was in mid-flow and the perfect soundtrack to these minutes of destruction. The club was in confusion and no one could not cope with. People were screaming and running, dying and falling. It was beautiful chaos, and the beautiful ones would not deal with it. I saw one of the vamps standing on a plinth, scoping the crowd. I came up behind him, closing my claw over the top of his skull, the pin-sharp tips of my claws piercing his flesh. I yanked him off his feet and dragged him to the ground. I still held his skull as I removed the shades with my other hand, then held the struggling creature on the floor with a knee and by the head. For a moment I saw my favourite thing, something scared, something that was supposedly the ultimate being, something that did not know what fear was, now knew fear. I laughed and closed my jaws around his neck and throat, snarling, biting deeply, and feeling the blood pump into my mouth. I continued the bite until I reached the spine and snipped through it with my carnassials to remove the head. The thing was very dead now, and I could see it was gone by looking into its eyes. I roared with exuberance and threw the head into the crowd. This was thrilling. I rose from the corpse and looked for another victim. Anything that got in my way was smashed aside as I got to the VIP area. Thankfully, the crowd had been rammed into the club, so the place was too stuffed for people to escape effectively, and I went through them as though they were in a giant blender and I was the spinning blade. I grabbed a human as I walked to the booth and threw it at one of the vamps that stood looking at me. He was taken off his feet and went flying across the floor. The human, well, who cares? The next vamp reacted by leaping forward and drawing, yes, it had to be, a katana. I mean, I am trope as a werewolf, but a vampire with a katana is super trope. He did some on-the-spot martial arts moves and settled into a pose that I had seen on TV. He then leapt into the air like a gymnast and yelled something at me that I could not make out even with my super hearing. This slightly hypnotised me, and I watched him fly through the sky, a little mesmerised by the move. To be honest, I wasn't really thinking. Only too late did I see him point the sword at my chest, land, spin, and impale me hilt deep. Ouch. I stopped and looked at him, and he smiled a classic smile of victory. He had killed the werewolf. I looked at the sword, and then at him. He now looked confused and didn't understand why I wasn't falling, screaming, or dying. He smiled again and twisted the hilt, turning the blade. That really fucking hurt a lot, and I wasn't having any of it. So I brought both my claws together in broad sweeps on either side of his head. The deadly clap exploded his head into puree that splashed me from the impact. The body collapsed, and I pulled the sword from my chest. That would heal, but I better be a little bit more careful. The two remaining vamps attacked at once, one from the left and one from the right. Not individually like in the movies. They did it correctly. They both had those sweeping knife things that looked really cool. You know, the ones that look like claws? They're used a lot in like Carly. Crambits, that's the ones. I think they're called crambits, yeah. They did a lot of dancing, spinning, leaping, flicking, and taking the knives back and forth, and so I smiled and went for them. They ran forward and hacked and slashed at me. I punched one in the face. I felt a good solid crunch as my knuckles broke his sunglasses, his nose, and then went into his sinuses. He flew several yards from the strike before impacting the back wall with another sickening crunch and a broken scream. I grabbed the other one by the wrist as he slashed me across the belly. It hurt, so I yanked his arm off and threw it behind him. He went on one knee and held his stump and screamed to the sky. This just meant he was nice and low, so I stamped on him, 4 or 5 times until his head and upper torso were vampire paste. I now turned to the vamp that the wall had hit. It got up from the floor, looked at me, made eye contact, turned, and ran. WTF, as you young people say. Was that the best they had? I now stood before her. She was sitting in her seat, fully relaxed and calm. Seriously, she just sat there and smiled at me. Luscious, long, latex-bound legs crossed and chilled on the low table before her. Next to her was a moaning human leaking from holes in its neck. It looked like it was in heaven and didn't seem to notice anything at all in the room. Somehow, the club now went quiet. The beautiful doors finished their song, and the majority of people still in one piece or capable of leaving had gone. The only thing that was left was the dead and the dying. They were mourning and moving, but not doing much else. She sat there and gently tapped her foot, smiling at me some more. She was so confident it brought me a moment of doubt. I I even flinched as she reached forward and picked out the olive from what I assumed was a martini. She sat back and giggled, maintaining eye contact. She'd noticed the flinch, and I felt a bit stupid for it, to be honest. Then, staring into me, she seductively sucked the olive from the stick, chewed it 3 or 4 times. It was 4 times I counted. She then swallowed it down. Fuck, it was hot. The fur on the back of my neck rose, and that wasn't the only thing, to be honest. To add to the sexual tension, she held a small wooden stake for the olive and licked it before regarding me again. I was enraged, scared, and crazily turned on. She showed me complete contempt, but in a very sexy manner. I lifted myself to my full height, some 8 feet tall, and I was 5 feet wide across the shoulders, and roared a roar taken from the very bowels of hell. That would terrify her. When I stopped, she sat back in her seat and smiled again, placed the cocktail stick in the side of her mouth, and clapped, and then paused. Eventually, she reached again, lifted her glass, did a little grrr right back at me, and it battered my mind as she batted her eyelashes. The roar never failed. My roar never failed. I felt, well, it did this time. I felt quite impotent at this point. Why don't you transform and just join me for a drink? I can get a dog bowl if you prefer not to change. I've been waiting for you to join us. I didn't quite expect this kind of mess, though, she said, nodding to, the carnage in the room. Please take a seat. I want to get to know you a little, Will. Yes, I know your name. I think she thought I would suffer from the glamour that she used. It was a fight. I could not let her do this, and Fen inside me gave me a somewhat of a mental slap, and from the back of my mind scolded me for thinking with my dick. I felt the glamour tickle, and the want to change and sit with this beauty was almost overcoming me, but I could deal with it. I knew Fen was going to go mental in my head if he had not been in there. I would have probably sat and spoken to her, to be honest. I stood as the werewolf before her and did nothing. My breathing had normalised, and I just stood there. She motioned to the seat once more. I shook my head and pointed at her. My claws were covered in ichor and nastiness, and a claw flicked a drop of blood in her direction, which was really cool. I wish I'd done it on purpose. The blood landed on her right cheek as a droplet. She giggled again, and she melted parts of me that we won't go into. She dramatically wiped her cheek with the middle finger of her right hand, taking the drop of blood from it and popped it into her mouth, letting her finger dally on her tongue. Once she'd finished, she slowly took the finger from her blood-red lips, smiled, and blew me a kiss. Why are vampires so cool? Why aren't werewolves that cool? We stayed in this tableau for a while. She was sure that I was going to acquiesce to her wishes. I didn't move. I just stood breathing. My nostrils flared at her. Saliva and blood dripped from my maw. I was the antithesis of this beautiful creature before me. I was the beast. She was the beauty, but neither of us were any less deadly than the other, I hoped. And then it came. Yes, it came. There was a moment, just a brief moment of uncertainty in her beautiful violet eyes. Yes, and I moved. But so did she. I flew forward, arms outstretched to grab her as she sat. My claws tore into the vinyl-covered seating just where her backside had been sitting moments before, shredding the material and releasing the foam padding inside. She had somehow somersaulted over my head and now was somewhere behind me. I lost her in that second and felt the sting as a cut slashed my upper back, followed by another. I span, and as I did, she made her distance so I couldn't reach her. She was laughing. She was laughing. She stood before me now. Her organic-looking sword was casually held in her hand and again smiled at me. At least it wasn't a fucking katana. She now raised a finger to me and wagged it and mouthed, "Oh no." I rushed forward and swung. I was too slow. The bitch ducked below my arm and slashed the inside of my thigh. Then she pirouetted away to the left, and I could feel my blood run. I knew it had stopped soon, but I didn't like it. She lifted her sword point to the ceiling in front of me, in front of her nose. It was as though she was doing some kind of salute or something. Then she brought her head forward and licked my blood from her blade. I didn't like that. Her eyes closed as she tasted me, and she moaned in pleasure as she ran her tongue over the blood-covered steel. It was one of the most erotic things I've ever seen. I was stunned into paralysis. I only could watch her, then her eyes flickered open, and I fell into her eyes. Well, Fen was screaming into my head. I came back to the real world, shook it, and batted my eyes. Once able to move and think again, I acted out that my injuries were much more significant than they were. I limped and reached for the wound in my thigh. She got a kick out of this as she strutted back and forth before me. I think she thought it was more or less over. She just had to finish the job. You are a fine beast. I will have your head on my wall, be it human or wolf. She said, I am too fast for you. You are going to die tonight from my cuts. You will bleed out and die. I will drink from you as you fail. I will look into your eyes until they lose the spark that you call life. I shook my head and leapt. She shot to one side, wiping the sharp edge across my chest. I bellowed and turned my back to her as I held my arms across the new wound, leaning forward and breathing heavy. It seemed that I was in a world of hurt and unable to focus on her anymore due to my injuries. She walked behind me, ready for the killing blow. Again, she made the classic baddie mistake. She did the gloating thing and took too much time before striking. She even spoke a truly cliched line before the final attack. I will see you in hell one day, wolf. I now let the weapon I held in my palm hang from my hand. It was a long shot, and I might be dead if I got this wrong, but Fen had a theory, and I always trusted Fen. She brought down the blade, and I span a lot quicker than she had surmised I could. I intercepted the downward strike. She had both hands on the handle of the sword. It was the executioner's stroke, so she did not want to be weak. I wrapped a little jewellery gift around her wrists as it came down. She froze, and that beautiful face seemed to shatter. What do I mean by that? Beauty was just gone. Horror and hell washed over it. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen, and I've seen some pretty horrific shit, you know. She froze. It seemed she was unable to move. She finally found her voice and screamed and fell to the floor. The scream hurt me as she let it loose. I was deafened, and anything glass in a 10-foot area smashed. Those dying humans around us died instantly just from the noise. The sword that she held flew from her grip, and it landed with a tip buried in the ground. Ding! It just stood there vibrating as if, a perfect magical movie moment. She was now rolling madly on the ground, and she was doing all she could to remove the restraints around her wrists, which smoked as though burning. She was too weak to remove that little strand of beads that were there. She continued to scream and roll back and forth on the floor. Her glamour was gone. There was nothing now. She was covered in blood and dead and detritus of all those that had fallen, the snot and the fecal matter of the fallen. She was no longer beautiful, just a fucking mess. I stopped and watched. It was delightful to see, it really was. I changed back to my human form, and Fen and I stood over her. She struggled and screamed in horror. Oh my god, I wish you could have seen it, really. It was incredible to watch. One of the most potent things now, weak and pathetic. Eventually, she ran out of steam and energy. It took a while, but she settled to just lying there, crying and mewing. It was delicious. So delicious. I knelt ready for her to launch herself at me. I thought she might have been faking or lying in wait for me. You know how it is in the Marvel movies. The baddies never go down with the first blow. She was not going to do anything though. She couldn't. She was laying still. I brought my mouth to her ear and started to whisper. Hey, that thing on your wrist, that's a rosemary blessed by Pope John John Paul the whatever. I was hoping that it may have that kind of an effect, but this is far beyond what we thought. Now you're mine. You're coming home with me, and we will have so much fun. I normally only get to play with humans, and they break easily. Now a vampire, you should be able to take so much fun punishment. You're going to be my greatest piece of art ever. I grabbed her by the back of her jacket and dragged her face down through the dross on the floor, making my way to the fire exit and Malcolm's waiting car. I had my favourite memento. I play with it regularly. Now, don't judge me. I don't do any sexy stuff to it. I'm not like that. Rape isn't my thing. Her sexy ass was not the important thing to me. I just had a new play toy. A new doggy toy, as it were. I now owned a vampire. Please subscribe and like to the, what's it called, channel. Go listen to some of the other stories. There's over 100 things on here now, so please do, and I love you very much, and the next episode will be the last vampire episode. Thanks for listening. You're all great. Love you. Bye.